I'm Chris Condo. I'm with Forrester Research. Today we're going to talk about applying lean principles to Agile and DevOps. Thanks very much for joining me. So at Forrester, I have to read this because I don't really remember it. We work with business and technology leaders to develop customer-obsessed strategies that drive growth. Customer-obsessed is the really important piece here regarding Forrester. We really consider all of the work that's putting into DevOps, all the work that's being put into technology. The reason why it's accelerating is because customers are really in charge of the buying power when it comes to software. Software is really energizing the economy. It's, when my daughter, who's old enough to buy her own car, says she bought a car because it connected to her iPhone, I realize something has drastically changed in my lifetime where you don't care about how fast it goes, you don't care about how big the engine is. All you care about is that I can listen to my tunes on my car from my iPhone. And so that definitely tells you that apps are sort of taking over, and software is a big component of that. So here's the agenda. Digital transformation, are we there yet? People are sick of hearing about it, but we'll talk about it anyways. It must mean we're in the middle of it if you're sick of hearing about it, right? It's like when you ask the question to your dad when he's driving the car, or your mom, I suppose, on your way to Nova Scotia from New England like I was, and are we there yet? You asked it 55 times because you were never there. But then by the time you got there, then you realized it wasn't worth it. No, it will be worth it. There's a bunch of trees and an ocean. It's really pretty. But when you're 12, you don't really care about that. Agile plus DevOps and Lean are kind of key to the journey, and getting there isn't easy. So, so one of the things, this is my own little, it's kind of hard to read. I didn't realize it was going to be like this, so I'll get out of the way. Digital transformation is transforming the business to be customer-focused and deliver value directly to the customer via digital capabilities. I kind of came up with my own definition there. I was trying to think of something that fit, and to me that fits pretty well, right? The whole idea is transforming your business to give whatever business value that your business does. I don't care if it's renting a car or maybe you deliver porta potties. I don't care what it is. People want it on an app now. They don't want it they don't use yellow pages anymore. Hello. So and they want to know they want to have things sort of automatically happen and magically appear. So it's got to be digital. It doesn't matter what business you're in. Here's a little example I like. This year, maybe last year, whatever, it's changed much dramatically, but when you did your taxes, the government's version of providing digital transformation was giving you forms online, so you didn't have to go to the post office and get them yourself, or the library, right? Although my daughter works at a library, my other daughter, and she tells me that people still come in for forms. And you filled it out, and you stuffed it in a mailbox, and you owned it, right? If there was an error, you owned that. If you didn't know if you were going to get a tax refund or not, you didn't know if you could bank on it or not. You just didn't really know what was going to happen. It was like a big mystery. You just dropped it in the mail and you hoped it worked, right? I mean, that happens with a lot of businesses. But these days with digital transformation, the idea is you just snap your W-2 and it does all the check marks for you. So you take all that back-end processing that maybe used to happen at the government, where they would verify your income and verify that all the numbers added up and verify that you're going to get the refund that you said you were going to get, or verify that they want to audit you. And it takes all that functionality and brings it right to your doorstep. And then these days you can even get the money put right in your bank that day, right? That's just absolutely amazing. So that's what digital transformation is. It's taking all that processing, all that value, all the capability that you used to do behind the scenes, and brings it right to the user's doorstep. So that's what we mean by digital transformation. And even though a lot of companies have gone down this road, there's still a lot of companies that have yet to go down that road. So the next important thing I want to talk about is this thing we call customer experience, the complete end-to-end user experience the customer has with your product. It's a very, very important piece, and that's why I'm kind of starting off talking about that. At Forrester, we have this metric we call the Customer Experience Index. It's measured by about 6 or 7 questions that we ask the users of products. And we've actually come up with a mathematical formula that can tell you that if you could improve your Customer Experience Index by 1 point, you can improve your bottom line incremental revenue per customer by a certain amount of money in these various vertical industries. And there's a bunch of other ones that we cover as well, but it didn't fit on the slide. So you can literally guarantee that if you improve your customer experience index, you can improve your bottom line revenue. Another way of looking at it is normalized stock price. If you look at all the people that we've analyzed from a customer experience perspective and took all the leaders and compared them against the laggards, there's actually like a 40% or 30% difference in stock price. And that's normalized stock price, not like, just one number compared to the other. So people who are in the same industry, who have a customer experience index higher, much higher, that are leaders versus those that are on the bottom, have a vast difference in stock value as well. So customer experience really matters. And then this is a case study we did with a bank, and what they discovered was that improving their customer experience drove 2 times the amount of income to the bank. So customer experience is really important. If you read the State of DevOps report from Ordora, the folks that, and we have the author here at the CloudBees conference, the Jenkins conference this week, you'll know that driving customer experience means driving more releases, driving more value to the customer, giving them experiences that they want to have, and getting to them in their hands quicker, faster, up to date, and updated on a regular basis. So that's where it all kind of comes. So you take digital transformation, you combine it with the customer experience, and you combine those forces together, and it's really driving the need for a faster release cycle. It's driving the need to improve customer experience. It's driving the need to monitor customer experience so that you know where your numbers are. And it's driving development teams, operations teams, product teams to all work much more closely together. And that's what Lean's all about. The whole idea of squeezing out inefficiency in your process, about working closer together, about really optimizing your process. So one of the interesting things, I used this slide in an earlier presentation, is that many firms think that they've already completed their digital transformation. And if you think that you've completed digital transformation, you might as well just put yourself out of business, because it ain't happening, right? The whole idea about digital transformation, the whole idea, are we there yet? It's just it's a continuous journey. Now that we've started this and realized that there are always going to be disruptors, there's always going to be new competition. The whole advent of the cloud, the whole advent of AI and machine learning, all of these technologies are just raising the stakes about what it means to be in business, what it means to stay competitive. So digital transformation doesn't end. It's got a beginning, but it doesn't have an end. Maybe it'll be called something else someday when we get beyond digital, whatever that is, I don't know. So that's why leading companies and organizations make software development their core competency, right? Software development needs to be a core competency in order to stay competitive, in order to stay relevant. And so that's why many businesses, they have to master digital to stay in business. They realize that software powers their digital experience, and they realize that software execution excellence equals business excellence. So basically, you need to have either have a good partner that can do software development for you. It could be a systems integrator, whatever. You don't have to do it all in-house, but you need to make software development a core component of your business. If you're not, if you're just outsourcing it, and you're just going to the lowest bid or whatever, you're going to have a pretty vanilla experience. You need to make this core to your business. So when we think about businesses must make software development, they also have to master Agile and DevOps. And so we have this Ferrari over here that sort of represents the whole Agile process. But you might have this really great process, but it can only go so fast. DevOps is sort of like the highway that kind of Agile can run on. It allows you to go faster, it allows you to go more automated, it allows you to take a lot of those manual steps that you're doing today and really sort of string them together in one continuous process. Another slide on this. Agile tears down the wall between business and DevOps, right? So the whole idea is, you take the whole idea of building and ideating, you get release and monitoring, you put them all together with automated test, you can get continuous software delivery. So it's better than just Agile. Agile plus DevOps is better than just Agile alone or just DevOps alone. Faster business value, 41%. It went from 41 to 69%. Frequency of delivery went from from 75 to 83%. Improved technical quality up to 72%. and improved functional quality up to 72% from 47%. So these are all like surveys that we've run where folks said, like, when I had just Agile alone or just DevOps alone, these are the improvements that they got in those particular metrics. So, but it's not easy, and so we're seeing a lot of companies struggle. So when you look at adopting Agile, adding DevOps makes it harder, right? So when asked about knowledge of their firm's Agile practices, we asked these questions to the respondents, like, some of the biggest challenges were people in behavioral change, trying to get buy-in, lack of skilled product owners. Those are the two top reasons that people have a hard time adopting Agile. But on the bottom here, 26, 25, 22, 20% of folks are talking about technology as barriers to getting Agile plus DevOps. So it's not easy to take on these challenges. It's not easy to find the right skilled people. It's not easy to get business leaders who are interested in actually, going all in. In the previous discussion, we had a panel and we talked to a gentleman from Allstate was talking about how Allstate has gone all in on digital labs, where they're actually putting business people in each of their digital labs that are located, globally. So it takes a lot of leadership from the top down and from the bottom up to kind of get Agile plus DevOps moving in the right direction. So development velocity is stuck. Now this number is kind of skewed because each year we've interviewed and surveyed more and more people, but mostly, for the most part, this is respondents averaging 1 release or more per month. And the number has really gone down, or I would call it flat with the noise. We went from 2,000 people who answered the question in 2017 to about 3,000 in 2018. So as you grow the population, you get different numbers. But I would say it's relatively stayed flat. People are still having a hard time accelerating their delivery cycle. And it could be that we're just including more people in the survey, or it could just be that they keep running into further, more and more barriers. Has your organization implemented, or where does it stand in its relation to DevOps? So implemented or expanding, only 33%. Planning to implement is 35%. Only 19% have actually implemented what they consider a DevOps plan, where they put that whole practice into place. And there's still, a few people that maybe not, we're not going to do it. So maybe that's the guy that's managing the porta potties. Agile is slowly but steadily scaling in firms. There's a horizontal and a vertical scale. So this is kind of a complex slide. I was looking at it, trying to figure out how to actually explain it in English. But people who, roughly what % of the development team in your organizations are using Agile practices? And so it goes from few people are using it, has decreased, so that's a good thing, to most people are using it is increasing. So that's how you read this slide. It's kind of a confusing slide. But the idea that more and more people are adopting Agile is a good thing. Agile allows you to sort of like make changes on the fly, understand what the customer wants, measure, repeat, iterate. It's the whole idea, the original Agile mantra was just basically, as you go through the cycle of incremental development, you're only delivering value that's important to your customer. You're kind of eliminating all the things that aren't important. And you don't know that sometimes in a waterfall approach because you think everybody wants these 55 features and it turns out they only needed 10. So if you thought CI/CD was hard, now you need to secure it all. And so I was just looking at one of our reports on security test tools and the state of security in 2018. And I was just like amazed at how many different security tools there are out there. And so every time you think you've got this sort of licked, and this is why digital transformation I think is so hard, and adopting DevOps seems to be a never-ending journey, is that every time you turn around, there's another tool that you need to do, there's another issue that needs to be solved through automation. And so it's just sort of a never-ending collection of tools, which I suppose leads to another problem where people are just getting overrun with so many tools, they're just holding up, they just don't know what to do. But this is basically a number of security tools, and as they're being used across different verticals in their adoption. It's kind of hard to see. This is supposed to be a heat map. Darker colors are obviously more prevalent than lighter ones, but it's not showing up too well. I apologize for that. So complexity, fear, and slow adoption plague low performers. So So this slide, I think, is out of place. So one of the problems that people are dealing with is Internet of Things. That's a complexity they have to deal with. 80% playing an IoT component. This is really kind of a misplaced slide, so I apologize. Integrated teams outperform siloed teams. We've seen a lot of research about that, but 80% of developers say they work in silos in our survey. So even though we keep talking about product teams and bringing business and operations and all these people together and having these sort of like shared services teams on the periphery and integrated product teams in the middle, only 20% of the teams are really doing it. 80% still say they're working in silos. So that's got to change if we want to get things better. Adopting microservices. Now, it's not like a panacea. Everyone goes to microservices, but the idea behind a microservice architecture is that you can split apart functionality. You can have teams focus on that functionality and understand its SLAs and understand its metrics and get it, working as best as possible. And it allows you to sort of like, allow teams to go in parallel. But only 18% are really planning to adopt these things. Now, the whole microservice architecture. I'll tell you a little story about this. I didn't actually buy into the whole microservice approach. I was thinking that like all it's going to add up to is a bunch of latency between components, a lot of complexity. How do you figure out which channel goes to where? How do you do authentication? Went to a DevOps meetup in the Boston DevOps group at Wayfair. They're at Copley Plaza of all places. And that's where all their developers work. And they were talking about their DevOps journey and why they went with microservices. And it really came down to being able to deliver all the different components at different speeds. They have some sort of like large business apps that a lot of their catalog and stuff runs on. Well, those things weren't changing too fast, but they had search engine, they had offers. They wanted to change their website in a more dynamic way. And what they realized is that every time they pushed their monolith, it was taking months to do it, and they just couldn't work at the speed of business that they needed to. By breaking that big, huge web application up into a bunch of smaller components, they could finally free up all those teams to work in a more agile way. They could allow them to each work at whatever the pace of business needed for them to innovate, for them to move faster, for them to provide greater value to their customers. And they have like a really vibrant DevOps culture, which I was really amazed by. And so I really got bought into the whole idea that microservices is, it's a cool architectural pattern, but what it really does, it's a great business pattern. It's a great execution pattern. It's a great way to allow your business to go quickly and provide value faster to your customers. More people need to do it. Continuous delivery is needed to execute better and faster, but 66% of organizations fail to automate from development to production. So, again, there's this whole lack of automation. Probably, by and large, it's on the automated test side. Automated test is very hard. Taking a manual test engineer and saying, now you're going to automate this isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. That's asking someone who's maybe never coded to become a developer. So those are tough tasks. It's hard to find those skills. It's hard to find a developer that thinks like a test engineer, but they're out there. And those are the kinds of skills you need to cultivate. And to grow in your team or find if you can't. So automating all the way to production is a very important part. I was actually just talking to Tony Anter. He was on the panel with me before, and we were talking about where's the best place to get started in continuous delivery and automation. And he was talking about test automation. It's usually like you can build as fast as you want, you can code as fast as you want, but if you can't test it, what good is it? And I was sort of coming from the infrastructure side saying I kind of feel like if your production environment's a mess and you're not using infrastructure as code, all you're going to be doing is putting out fires your whole time. You're never going to be able to get any code out the door. So there's a lot of places where automation can really help and speed things up. And so everyone's got a different perspective, so it's good to get a well-rounded answer. Tools and technology that can help with Agile and DevOps transformation. So containers. I think this is a year old, so this is probably, these numbers are probably much further up. But organizations that expect containerized applications to grow by 80% in the next 2 years. So I see everybody adopting containers basically as their sort of like method of getting on board the DevOps train. 66% of organizations who adopted containers experience accelerated developer efficiency. I think that all comes about from standardization. You're not like, shipping to these snowflake environments anymore. You're using containers to kind of manage the environment that your code's being shipped in. Makes it a lot easier. 75% of companies achieved a moderate to significant increase in application deployment speed. And Kubernetes is heading towards a de facto standard. Maybe today it is a standard, but it's pretty damn close. So there's a lot of folks that are sort of in the container business, but it feels like Docker and Kubernetes are really taking the world by storm. Snowflake environments kill speed. Move to infrastructure as code. I don't know how to say that a million times. If you're still configuring, hardware on a production server with a Word document or some shell script that you hope is going to work the same way over and over again, then you're just, it's very wishful thinking. You really need to move to a more automated approach. Value stream management tools. So we just did an evaluation of these tools at Forrester. The whole idea of taking value stream mapping, which is taking each step of your process, capturing the lead time, capturing the process time, trying to find areas of inefficiency, trying to find out duplication of steps, trying to weed out all the miniature steps that go on in between code and production deployment. I mean, even on this list right here, it's nicely structured. But then when you actually ask a developer, why was there a 30-day lead time on something? You might find out, well, Mary over in security asked me to do a pass by her, and well, that's not on my thing here. Well, I have to do that every time I push the code to this environment, and then you find out there's all these manual steps involved, right? And so doing a value stream map, understanding where your process time is, can really be valuable in understanding where to automate. It can really help you understand where to squeeze out redundancy and manual tests. So the whole idea of visualization of the process, get a handle on what's going on, identification of waste, introduction of quantifiable metrics. So metrics are dangerous. We've talked about it in a couple of different places where they can be used in good ways and bad ways. You can overuse metrics and try to measure too many things. But having metrics over time about your process and your time and your automation, you have to come up with a good set of metrics, but it's worth doing. And it enables what I call sort of like a shift right. We always talk about shifting left, where you bring testing into development, you bring infrastructure as code, you can test that now as part of development. Everything can happen in the continuous integration cycle. But value stream management tools kind of allow like a sort of a shift right, where business can kind of come in and understand all the investment that's going on. They can understand what's going on. Where's the value in this process? What's actually being delivered out the door? Are customers actually appreciating this improved automation that we're doing? Are we seeing any discernible improvement in customer satisfaction? Are we growing in any particular way that's meaningful to the business? And so having this sort of value stream approach kind of can connect the business with the whole DevOps movement. So when we looked at value stream management tools, we looked for a couple of different types of capabilities. The idea to map your value stream, to visualize it with metrics, to provide some governance, and to provide sort of a core interoperability and common data model. These types of things allow you to sort of string together a process from agile planning, so that the work item that's represented in Jira is the same item that you can measure against that got shipped as code out your production environment. There are many vendors that we've been looking at that provide this capability. Here's just a small little chart about where they come from, and each of them, whether it's Plutora or Electric Cloud or CloudBees, Microsoft, IBM, or Blueprint and Panaya or TaskTop, they all got their own perspective on how to bring a value stream management approach to software delivery. They connect tools together, and they provide you sort of like that string that says, how long did it take this work item to go from the agile planning board all the way out the door to production? And then once it got out there, did that item have was that particular feature, did it have a bug? What was the bug count? Did we fix it? And so sort of the idea of just getting you that end-to-end visibility that's really hard to get. And so customers who have been using DevOps, who've been using tools, have been plugging them together, they've been trying to build these dashboards themselves. It's not an easy thing to do. And so it's really, it's great that these companies have stepped up and are trying to provide this capability. So another thing that we see happening in DevOps and things that are going towards the whole lean is sort of the whole introduction of integrating security into DevOps. So that's a really big trend. The fact that security has sort of been on the outskirts, and it's been a manual process. I did some advisory, and the development team said the way they do security is they develop their code and they hand it off to a security team, and then they do something to it, and it comes back 3 months later, and then it's supposed to be secure. And I'm like, that's the most screwed up process I've ever heard in my entire life. How do you know what you have to do a diff to see what the code changed. They have to maintain it once it goes out to production. I'm like, that is just crazy. What really should happen is you should have invited those security folks into the original planning meeting and said, hey, we're going to be managing PII data. What should we be doing? What kind of steps do we need to take? Our code's going to be, how do we, what kind of measures should we be taking to secure that? And these security professionals should be able to provide advice. You're going to be executing the code. You're going to be developing the code. Here's what you need to know. Work on this for a little while, and come back and we'll do a checkpoint. And then as each step of the way, the security professional is really providing advice and guidance so that the product team can actually execute against that. So that it's sort of like a joint partnership rather than just sort of a handoff and a hand back. That's how you sort of because the people who write the code eventually are going to own the code in production. It's not going to be the security professional. It's going to be the people who wrote the code. Bugs on them if there's a security issue. And so they need to know how to fix it. They need to know how to be able to respond. So it's important. We were talking with a guy from Harry's Razors, and he used this term called the continuous discovery. I loved it, so I borrowed it from him. And they have this whole process where they use feature flags and A/B testing to really do all kinds of testing all the time in production. They have these well thought out plans, well thought out ideas, and then they use these tools to fine tune which features actually are winning features versus losing features, releasing their code into a single trunk, yet only turning it on when the business wants them to. So they had a very sophisticated DevOps process. I loved it. I'm going to be writing about it. But the whole idea of using these tools to really fine tune is another way of sort of doing the whole lean process where you're not doing one synchronous process, releasing code, and then hoping it works, crossing your fingers. You're actually doing a couple of different ideas at once, finding which ones the winners are, or you're checking in code constantly. You're always doing tests against it, and then you use a feature flag to turn it on, rather than always doing things in a synchronous manner. Functional test automation. Get rid of manual testing, reduce test time. So this is another survey results. We asked folks, how well do you think vendor supports, the functional test automation supporting your organization's transition to shorter delivery cycles, for the most part, we're getting, pretty good response from them. But by and large, this was actually an evaluation of tools, so it's kind of hard to get a good fix on this. But 40% of the claim of clients say that they're getting very good support from functional test automation to helping them reduce cycle time. So that's another important piece for sort of like squeezing out more time and reducing cycle time. And so, what's next? Well, the number of tools and technologies are expanding rapidly. So I feel like teams are going to be hard pressed to keep up, right? Every single day, if you're like starting, if you're like a DevOps professional, you're a developer, like every day it seems like there's a new tool you got to worry about. And eventually, it's just going to be tool overload. So I think what we're going to start seeing is maybe simplification of how those tools get applied, maybe greater collaboration amongst vendors so that those tools can kind of come pre-integrated. Those types of things are going to happen for folks to really adopt all the technology that keeps coming on board. People and process are equally important, so invest in your team. It's not all about the technology. It's really about how people use the technology and put it to use. So it's really important to have these multidisciplinary teams. It's really important to get folks involved from the beginning and all the way through to the end. Those value stream tools kind of provide that sort of capability to bring business folks, IT leaders, development leaders, test leaders, all in, give them visibility into what's going on. And transformation is only beginning. Now we're entering the age of AI and machine learning, so I think that's going to bring a lot of interesting problems to bear. I think it's going to solve a lot of problems. I think it's going to create a lot of problems. And how do you test AI and machine learning? I was at Carnegie Mellon only a few months ago, and they were talking about the fact that they don't know why some of their algorithms make the decisions they do. But we don't know. So what they do is they actually observe like the robots doing things, and then they reverse engineer why it made the decision it did. They had this whole video of these robots that played soccer, and they were like watching them pass the ball around. And then they had to go back afterwards and actually trace out all the paths of where the soccer balls went to figure out why did it pass to the person to the left and not to the person to the right, or the robot to the left versus the robot to the right. And then once they reverse engineer, they said, all right, that makes sense because this algorithm says this, and then the mean time to whatever, and the hypotenuse of the Pythagorean theorem, whatever, and it all worked out, right? But they didn't know that until they reverse engineered the video of why it made those decisions. And so they talked about the idea of having sort of transparent AI and machine learning where you understand why it's making those decisions so you can actually verify that it's doing the right things. But we're not there yet. And so, like I said, I think it's going to be interesting. So that's really the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, so you're talking a lot about leaning out the process in this climate where it's all about velocity, velocity, velocity.
Yeah.
Don't you fear that quality may at some point get neglected?
The velocity part of get neglected, you mean?
People are so focused on velocity that they don't cut out quality.
Well, that's a real problem, right? So if you cut out quality and you just put garbage out the door, your customer experience will go down, and somebody who cares about quality and customer experience will beat you to the punch. It's going to be taken care of by market dynamics when it comes to quality issues. Now, if you're in a captive environment where it's your healthcare provider or the government or some other type of organization that you can't easily change, then that's a real problem, right? And so I don't know how that's going to get solved, but those can be big issues. I agree.
Following up on what he just asked.
Sure.
Are there ways to do this without producing a video, watching the video over and over and reverse engineering what the robot did to find out what the qualitative PKIs would be for an organization, to figure out what formulas you could have, combinations of variables that relate directly to customer perceived quality, and then say, okay, instead of focusing all the time on velocity,
Right.
Let's do 40 or 50% this qualitative mix?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that the organizations that sort of that excel in this whole new digital era are those that find that balance between, delivering an excellent customer experience at speed with a minimum amount of bugs and issues. And so you'll find out that if you talk to some of the leading companies, that a lot of times they do put out code that maybe shouldn't be there. So what are they doing? They're using a tool like a feature flag that allows them to basically push code to production, but then expose it only to a certain set of people. Maybe just the testers in production. Maybe just preview analysts. Maybe just journalists. Maybe just like what do you think? Beat up on it. And the difference between that kind of an environment and sort of like, when I was doing releases, we would test to like an A/B test almost, right? You'd have this staged environment that was called pre-production. You'd push all your code to it. But the problem is that pre-production environment had like a dummy database, had fake data in it. You'd try to go ahead and say, well, it looks like the code's working. And then you'd actually switch over, your code over to the production environment, and nothing would work, and you couldn't figure it out. That just really was miserable. The modern solution for that really is like, you test, you do that pre-production, but then you actually push that code incrementally out to a couple of servers where you can maintain kind of control over it, and you look at it. And you're like, all right, it looks like it's a piece of shit. Let's pull it back. And or it looks like it's working well. Let's go ahead and push it out progressively further. And so those are the ways you sort of have to strike a balance, because you can't test everything. You're never going to find all the unknowns, right? You're pushing with velocity, so you try to push with velocity, but try to mitigate that risk as best as you can using other technologies.
Microsoft made the mistake one time of pushing a preview of Windows 8.
One time?
One of the multitude.
Yeah.
We could be here a while. They previewed Windows 8 on me and asked me for my qualitative opinion. And they were there for a while.
Yeah.
And just as a note on that is that quality issues, if you have those quality issues, they're going to slow you down.
Right.
So
Uh-huh.
so you can wreck your velocity if you're putting out.
That's right. If you're putting out junk and you're always putting out fires, you're never innovating, you're never adding new features. You're just constantly under, the grindstone of trying to figure out why is our production system miserable. Next question. Hi.
So you mentioned the automated testing. I heard you mention, it's hard for manual testers to suddenly become automated testers.
Right.
And then you mentioned, maybe you can find them. And so, I'm federal government, so we can't go find them.
Yep.
So we're trying to retool manual testers to become automated testers.
Right.
It's not going well.
It's hard.
Any advice?
Send them all back to get their computer science degree.
I know, right? Yeah. So we did develop a new course called, for Intro to Java.
Sure.
Just so because we're trying to push BDD on them, and
Yep.
so they can write their own step definitions.
So
and
I agree that
it's
that's
not going well.
Yeah. So there's a whole realm of software development tools called low-code tools. I don't know if there's low-code for automated testing, but I imagine that's an unmet demand, and you'll start seeing these sort of WYSIWYG sort of like test tools that allow you to create automated tests, only using these low-code tools that were originally designed like create new applications.
Mm-hmm.
That's my hope, anyways, for you. But right now,
They're not
the-
quite there yet.
yeah.
Or they don't run in the pipeline. Some of
Yeah.
them are there, but they're not worth.
so what are
looking
you
at.
doing now to try to get around that? And someone seemed to have a solution over here. Raise their
Not
hand.
so much a solution, but just the idea that you have that these people who don't know the automation, if you commit an automation specialist into that team for set periods.
Right.
Yeah, we're trying to grow like a mentoring group. Right now, a lot of it's getting pushed on the developers, so they're overwhelmed because
Right.
we've already pushed on them. SonarQube. Like, guess what?
Yep. Yeah.
You got to fix your issues. There's a lot being pushed on the developers, so having them partner with the testers was what we originally thought, and they're just overwhelmed at this point. So we are
Right.
trying, like you said, like a center of excellence or a mentoring group. We're trying to grow that. So.
That's a tough spot. So companies that try to get around that will maybe hire a vendor that can come in and help them with that, or actually have test automation engineers as part of their service policy from their vendor. But if you can't go down that road and you have to train these folks, then it's just going to be a long road of trying to train them. And not everybody wants to do it, right? Not everybody has the aptitude, and not everybody actually has an interest to be an automation engineer. But
That's
if you
okay.
tell
We
them
have
that they'll
plenty
make
of
more
work.
money, maybe they will, because those are pretty good jobs these days.
Yeah, and then we lose them.
Yeah.
We have done that too.
Hi, we currently need to be SUX Compliance. So we are automating from the start CI, a little bit CD, but our bottleneck right now is the moment we need to make the change request. We need to fill a form. That form gets reviewed by QA team,
Yep.
and then a CAB needs to approve that change request, and until then we can implement to production. All this process takes about a day, maybe two. So is there a way, or do you have an idea how can I automate this process or make it simplified or something?
Do you have to show any kind of evidence on top of the form that you fill out? That you're doing some sort of checklist or that you're providing some sort of like audit, functionality? Because typically what happens in a situation like that is, you would just have this form that you, so if you're filling out a form and someone has to review it, obviously they're looking for something on the form. And so whatever can be automated as far as those check boxes go. Yeah, you got.
We used to have that kind of need at my organization by using Jira, and Jira is business process based.
Yep.
We're able to completely automate the process of getting cab approval and from beginning to the end and so satisfy the SOX. All they have to do is just gotta make sure you have a SOX narrative that it's covered into the Jira process.
Interesting. So it just becomes part of the workflow.
It becomes part of the workflow.
Yep.
All auditors usually want to see is that you have evidence of having tested.
Right.
And that's captured into the Jira steps that will satisfy your SOX. I mean, you have to work with your SOX.
They have to be willing to go along with that kind of a process. But you basically take all their steps and you embody them in your Jira.
All SOX says is tell us what process that you follow and that you follow it. They don't tell you what steps to follow. You just describe what your steps and you actually follow what your steps are.
You should also read the book Accelerate. I think they presented this morning. That's a good one.
Yeah,
It tells
awesome.
you a lot of things as to why, what, and how. And like I think somebody just mentioned,
Yep.
SOX compliance and SOX rules and GCCs, they all come in the way. But when you go and really ask them, what is GCC, they ask us back what it should look like.
Right.
So it's all more about you telling them what it should look like.
Right.
And then follow that procedural process to the
Yeah.
Yeah, look at what the actual requirements are, because I had to do that, like looking through this 853, nowhere does it say you have to fill out a form and get it signed.
Exactly.
So look at what the real requirements are, and a really good white paper, it's called the DevOps Audit Defense Toolkit. I think it was Gene Kim, some other guy. And it's like an idea to just create a DevOps Defense Against Audit Toolkit where you point out where is all the auditable evidence. So if the auditor shows up, you can go, well, here it is. It's in, the toolkit tells me it's in the Jenkins log. Go look there. It's in the Bitbucket commit history. Go look there. Because that's all they want is the auditable evidence.
I was going to say,
It's like a white paper. It's the DevOps Audit Defense Toolkit.
at Jenkins World, actually in Washington, D.C., the CIO of the Social Security Administration got up and he talked about, having a compliant software development process. And when he said, well, we had to tell the compliance officers is like, you used to hold us compliant to this process where everything was manual. Our process today is automated. You need to understand that that's our process and just make sure we follow it. The job of you is to make sure we follow our process, not that we follow the process. It's the process that we're doing.
And that was Social Security?
Yep.
That's what I worked for.
Yep. But he said it was going to be a long road.
We have not convinced them.
He said it was going to be a long road. He got up in front of everybody and said that.
Yeah, okay.
It must be true, right? We couldn't record him, though. That was against the rules.
I wrote the toolkit. I haven't gotten approval for it yet. That was 2 years ago.
Go ahead.
Good. So the challenge I ran into in my organization, I mean, we do have some success stories. In other places, we have like old vendor apps, monthly cabs.
Yep.
The codes, the source control is managed in the app. 20-year veterans don't want to change.
Right.
I think I know some of the answers, but I mean, what's your take on it? How do you-
Fire them all.
Someone said kick them.
That's a tough one. People that don't want to change, I don't know what you do about that. I mean,
Buy them coffee. I don't know.
yeah,
make
no,
friends with
the
them.
whole carrot versus the stick methodology, right? But like, basically, one of the things that I think, if they're developers and they really love to innovate, the whole idea of having like hackathons, trying to get the culture involved, most people want to contribute when they feel like what they're contributing and what they're doing and the extra effort they're doing is actually contributing to the value they're delivering to to their customers. If they don't feel like that what they're doing, I remember we were going through ISO compliance. I worked at a military subcontractor, and the guy's like, see all those panels of books? That was the last compliance thing we did. We're just going to go through that all over again. It's a big, bunch of BS. Why are we even bothering? And if that's their attitude and they don't understand any value they're going to deliver, then they're going to have that, and I can't blame them. But if you can kind of turn that around and say, here's how we're going to get you involved. We need your ideas. We need your innovation to actually make this happen. Maybe you'll get more buy-in that way. All those people have a lot of experience. They have a lot of, what's the word I was looking for? Like institutional experience and whatnot. They could probably provide a lot of knowledge. It's just sort of drawing it out of them and convincing them it's worthwhile doing.
It's not easy to do. You have to find out kind of what they're afraid of.
Yeah.
And they're not going to tell you. The answer that they give you is not necessarily the answer.
Yeah.
So, you have to kind of read minds.
Yes.
So we have time for one last question.
And you can, and one of the things that I think that seems to be missing is sort of a mapping of the legacy terminologies, the legacy logic, and extracting that out and mapping it to match up to what the new stuff is now. So just any token example of moving from old application SCCM to new application like GitHub, but the logical explaining where the logical foundation is actually the same. You're doing something similar to what you've always been doing, but you're doing a different method that locks in your changes and allows better reuse and so on.
Absolutely.
So keeping their information relevant by explaining this term yesterday is this today.
All right, one more.
Next question. You may be standing between us and happy hour, but you can have your question.
That might be a tough one. So a lot of times we see evolution happening. You had physical hardware, you got virtualized machines, then you got Docker, and there's something new coming out constantly. And we continue to try to innovate, but the adoption is becoming extremely tough.
Right.
Because by the time we try to adopt, already we're wanting to innovate on somebody else. And it's getting extremely tough in trying to balance. And then there is a culture and the people and the learning aspect that the organization also has to come along. Have people seen that problem?
I've seen it just with folks just trying to adopt what I would call like a standard DevOps toolchain. Like they're just 10% of their development team is dedicated to just managing those tools, further innovating on those tools. And we really need to get those people working on delivering product, not delivering the things that allow us to deliver the product. And so, and I think that managers that aren't necessarily paying attention to all these intricate tools are getting overloaded by their development teams about all the tools that they need to take on board. I think it's a real problem. I think it's overloading, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to get solved, but I can bet that next year there'll be people focused on how to bring greater integration to some of those solutions so that you can actually get that kind of functionality from an end to end without having to necessarily worry about putting all the pieces together. Or at least it's a market opportunity. Let's put it that way.
Chris, thank you.
You're very welcome, Summer. Thank you.
For everybody else,
Thanks, everybody.
Happy hour is now going on in the expo hall, followed by the DevOps World.